five Curran brothers left there.
Yeah. Well, that sounds a lot like your family.
It was four of them we know of.
Do you know if they all came at once?
They did. They came, how did they come? I think they all left together.
Yeah.
And then they wandered around a little together in the States. We heard that there was one story that they may have ended up here in Maine, but they weren't sure. And they thought they might have gone west to Seattle to go up into the gold. From Seattle they'd go up to the gold fields up in Alaska, and then so there was a story that they ended up out there somewhere, but we lost contact entirely with them. So you may be a long lost relative.
I hope they found gold up there.
They did.
Really?
You know that a lot of them, we had relatives, friends right in this little town in Gordahork, Donegal. Maybe 30 or 40 left to go to the gold fields. Half a dozen returned with cigar boxfuls of gold dust.
Yeah.
And they bought the landlord's houses, and this was about the 1890s, 1900s. So they were, from the local point of view, they were very successful. They had come back to buy up the very area. They had been sort of tenants before them. So
Well, how was
some
the
did go back.
What's the feeling over now over there? What I'm trying to find out is, as opposed to what it used to be, was the landlords really cruel? Like they would have us believe? Or
They were
they were oppressed with it, the tenants?
Yeah, they were, the Anglo-Irish were not, they followed the custom of the time,
Yeah.
which they weren't any more cruel to the Irish than they were to the Scottish or to the Welsh. But they definitely believed they were top dog, and they had, that everybody else was inferior,
Yeah.
and that they had absolute rights
They
to
were
control.
more or less slaves.
Yeah, well, yes, they were till about the 1890s, and then it started to change, 1900. Then the government started to buy out their land.
I see.
But they would abuse their trust by going off and living in England and having factors or people, landlord agents who would collect the money. And if the people improved their house, now this is my grandfather's time, you added a window to your house, they would up the rent. So then they would go by and say, and then they would come and make trips to tourists, and they say, why are these people staying so poor? I mean, they look so, they think they fixed up their damn old houses. It's like a catch-22. If they fixed the house up, the rent went up.
Yeah.
If they didn't fix it up, they were looked down on.
It's
So
much the same here too, because it goes up. If you're doing improvements on your house here,
No, I don't want you to get down in the
it's a
cold.
strange. I mean, when you think about it, you can see their point, but you look at it from another angle. You see, it's kind of insane. There are people down our they will not put siding on their houses because the taxes will go up. These are old Maine or poor
our
people.
house is always under construction.
She thinks it's a book.
It's never.
No, Nancy, don't. I didn't know. Nancy, no,
Do you have one
Nancy.
down in the house?
I didn't know she had one.
Does she have a genealogy?
She has a genealogy because she just, a couple months ago, she mimeographed some for me because every time I give them to one member of the family,
Yeah.
they lose them. I don't
Yeah.
think I lose them.
Yeah.
I think they want them.
Well,
In other
Nancy's-
words, they keep them.
Nancy's erasing the hole.
Yeah. I looked in there, but I thought usually where I put them. This, isn't there? Do you have some skeletons? Did some people give you some skeletons?
We got something from the people up in Bangor, the Currans in Bangor.
Well, I wanted to know if they got them from me. All right, at least I got the first few.
You may have been the one that sent it to them then, that I got.
That,
They would have left many relatives in Ireland. Because,
that we can claim relationship.
oh yes.
I'd love to.
Yeah. Well, I could find out more on my end if I have that. If I could see that genealogy. I think what I had was
The dates. I'll have the
the
dates.
dates. Yeah.
And then this little boy that went there a couple of years ago, and I gave him this thing. His mother was, and his grandmother, and his great-grandmother, they
Yeah.
were all relatives. And he come back and said that the name of that place had been changed.
Huh.
So I don't know.
Yeah.
I didn't find the name of it,
Yeah.
and I can ask.
Now, what would, oh, sorry.
Your father's name was Mike, but
No,
didn't you?
And my grandfather's name, see, we didn't, my grandfather's name was Thomas.
Yeah.
And,
But didn't your father also have a relative or uncle named Mike or something like that?
Uncle Michael, yes, he come from Ireland.
Yeah.
See, Bartlett, Uncle Bartlett, we still call my father's uncles, we always refer to him Uncle Bartlett, and and my grandfather was Thomas,
Yeah.
and then there was Uncle Michael, he would be my father's uncle, not our uncle, and, who's that? John.
Who was the one who said you want to live while you're living?
Well, that was Uncle Willie.
That was
Yeah.
our old uncle, Papa's brother,
Uh-huh.
you know,
They were all born in this country.
yeah. No,
Oh, they
I
were
often
all
wondered,
born here. Oh, I see.
but,
What was your mother's name, your own mother's
my
name?
mother's name was Connors, but she was
Connors.
born here in
She was from here.
Bangor, Maine, she was
Yeah.
from Bucksport, Maine.
Yeah, Bucksport.
Yeah. But these, I don't know, these, and they, you know what's the coincidence? They all settled right around here.
So they wanted to be together. 4 brothers.
Probably if we got dug into it, you
Yeah.
wouldn't appreciate what they
I
were.
wanted to bring some of them over here. You know, I'd love to find some relatives and have them come over. You know, I thought that, gee, that would be something.
Well, my father will be visiting this summer from Philadelphia. He's an old Gaelic speaker. He's in his 80s now.
Yeah,
And he has a very good memory.
yeah. No,
And I'll bring him up.
I'd love to have you in here.
And
you know.
he would tell you everything he knows, which is usually quite a bit,
Yeah,
about history. I mean, he's a great storyteller. In
Yeah.
fact, I'm writing stories now just based on just things he's told me.
yeah.
Yeah.
We
And
want
I mean,
to,
a
because
book
we
that
have
just
forgotten to
compendium
do
of his
that.
stories that I'm trying to get published.
Yeah.
Because he's does remember, he's a
Yeah.
phenomenal memory.
Isn't that wonderful to
Yeah.
have you?
He's of the old,
Yeah.
the old
But that
stuff.
isn't old, if you say he's, did you say he was 80?
No, it isn't. But I'm saying he's of the old stock,
Yeah.
that is,
Yeah.
of the older generation that has a very good memory.
Yeah.
In Ireland, where we are, 80 isn't considered old because I have grandparents who are nearly 100, and they say, and their children are 80.
You know, Sunday when I was getting in church, I have, what do I have on my feet? You know, circulation.
Yeah.
And I picked up the rail and I said to this boy outside, I said, oh, it's hell to get old. He said, think young. so I've been thinking young.
Well, that's right. I utterly believe that. It's I mean, I found it with my father, for instance. Now that he's been retired for about 10 years, he's beginning to age a bit because even though he's got a young constitution, but he starts sitting around.
Yeah.
And he says, well, maybe I'm getting a little old now.
No,
But
no.
I'll tell you about
I blame it
75,
on
he used to
cabin
work all the
fever
time.
for the winter.
Yeah.
If we didn't have Nancy and Ben, young people around.
But I just wrote to him and asked him about our neighbor was Johnny Mickey Bon McSweeney, who lived next door to us in Donegal.
Oh, yeah.
And I asked him,
Your neighbor here?
no, over in Ireland.
Yeah, over in
And I
Ireland.
said, whatever happened to him? I remember going by a few years ago when I was visiting, and he was leaning on his spade, and he was 93 at the time. He would go out, he said, my father wrote back the other day, and he says, this man, McSweeney, would go out, and he says no matter how he felt, he would always go out every single day, and if he could do nothing but lean on his spade until he was 94 or 95, he would do it. And he would work, he had to every day go in the garden.
Yeah, isn't that funny? I just wanted
And I
to-
think he was still alive at the age of 97, he finally passed
Nancy,
away.
Isn't that funny? Excuse me, thank you for having it. It's here somewhere, but this is like the house that Jack built. Did you ever hear of the house that Jack
Oh,
built?
yeah.
You never can put your hand on anything. I have no system. Maybe
I think it's certainly for the Irish and the Scottish and so on, it was an unusual thing to do because for about 3,000 years, the Celtic people were known to be considered their genealogies as being extremely important. It was passed along orally.
yeah.
Right up, and this was the first break in the history of the Celtic people was in the last century when they started to migrate here. The first break in a 3,000-year period. So you can see that this is, they had official historians whose job in every village,
Right.
whose job was to retain the genealogies. And when they migrated across Europe and ending up in Ireland in 500 BC, you know, their genealogists moved with them. That was part of the tribal system.
think
So this is all very new, this break with history.
Yeah.
And I think it's a very dangerous thing that goes on when you start breaking the historical bonds, because you create a lot of trouble in people's internal connections, I think, in my own estimation.
Yeah, most tribal cultures had that same
Yeah.
sense of legend and the
Yeah.
importance of legend, and having people who were
Right.
had the role and responsibility of maintaining the history.
Yes.
the oral
Yeah.
history.
Yeah.
Well, what about the trouble in Ireland now? We're kind of bitter against it. Should we be bitter with the English or the British or whoever's doing it over there? It's been going on for so many years.
Yeah, I get very bitter very easily because my relatives are involved in some of the problems. I think yes, I think the English have done what they got away with in the rest of the world for 300 or 400 years, and Ireland is the last. They have left a legacy in South Africa, and it's still there, and they try to disclaim responsibility, but they caused a lot of those problems, and they've withdrawn from that. They left their legacy. If it wasn't for people like Gandhi and the difficulties in India, they would never have withdrawn from there. And they did things that were just as bad there as they do in Northern Ireland. The Amritsar Rebellion, where they shot hundreds of innocent people.
Even last week during that funeral,
Yeah.
that the trouble they had.
Yeah.
Well, I remember as a kid.
I don't think it's the English now as much as the bitterness that is built up between the native Irish Catholic and the Protestant, who are really the settlers. The Irish, where I am, don't even call them Protestant, they call them planters. Now they've been there 300 years, they're still called planters. Part of that is because they don't identify themselves as Irish even after 300 years. They say, oh, we're... Now, they haven't... So the problem is that they haven't made the major decision to become, in 300 years, to become part of the country they're living in. If they make that decision and begin merging in, the problems change.
So it's not a religious conflict, or is religion the excuse?
The religion's the excuse. It's a civil rights conflict to most people. A lot of the people on the Catholic side, so-called Catholic side, are really, they call themselves Republicans. They don't call themselves Catholic, they say. And back at the turn of the century, the people doing the battling were often Protestants. The leaders of most of the nationalistic Republican groups were Protestants. They were Wolfe Tones and so on, which was a little earlier on, but Henry Joy McCracken, all of these were all, Miller, Bigger, all of these people were all Protestant people. And so all of this stuff about that's a media thing, and it makes it simple for the media to think along this line, to think that it's, you know...
See, we don't understand. They used to tell us that they didn't walk on the same side of the street.
Yeah.
The Protestants on one side and the Catholics on
It's
the other.
probably true.
Now, there's a priest over in Portland who brings six children every summer and has them over there, and I think both he brings children from England and one from I don't know. But I have been, when I hear things like that, I feel so bitter against them.
Well, I've tried to understand it from a historical point of view, and I kind of blame a certain class structure. That is, the English are very structured, class-structured people, and I was reading The Making of the English Working Class by E.P. Thompson last night at home, and I realized that it's not the English people, really. It's because the problems that are faced by the Irish when your ancestors came here were the problems being faced by the working people in England too, the factory people, the people on the farms. That is, there was this tremendous division between classes in England. You're either of the aristocracy or you're of the working class. And if you're the working class, you were treated in a very, very menial way. And one of the reasons for the great migrations from England and from the British Isles and then from Europe was to break that class structure. And one of the reasons, of course, we have a democracy is to break that, because it was so radical, that class structure. The division was so enormous between the...
Papa's mother, Uncle one. And they said, she told them that It took her 13 days to come over, and she come on a,
More than that, wasn't it? 13 days?
that was 13 days, and she come on a load of gunpowder and what?
Railroad iron.
Railroad iron on the
Exactly.
boat she was on. And now, she's in there, in that thing. That was
I
nice.
don't think they could sail across in a sailboat within 13 days.
Oh, well, no, it was a big boat.
Depends on which way the wind was blowing now and how fast.
Did they come to Canada or to
I
St.
don't
John's,
know.
New
Well,
Brunswick?
maybe.
That's where more than half the Irish landed in St. John, New
Yeah.
Brunswick.
I think that's what they meant.
And then they would come down the coast to Boston, or they'd land in Machias, or they would go inland along the St. Lawrence, and Bing Crosby's relatives all came over apparently that way. They landed in St. John, and somebody wrote a history of Bing Crosby, and the family all landed up in New Brunswick, in that big valley area in
So
New
many of them
Brunswick.
did.
And then gradually in the late 1800s moved out west, and that's, you know, the way the migration often would
Might have
occur.
been the handiest route. Might have
Handy.
been the nearest way over.
Oh yeah, I think so.
Now it's, you know, so.
Yeah. Well, then when the railroads especially came in,
Oh,
they
yeah.
could go west very easily, so they would stay in Maine. That's why there was a great migration, I think, out of Maine when the railroads came in. There was
Are
another
there
great
many
migration.
youngsters that want to come over from Ireland now? Can they come over?
Well, not so well.
They can't.
No, well, they claim there's 100,000 illegal Irish in Boston and New York and
Yeah.
San Francisco. Because right now the policies of the immigration policies favor are weighed more to favor Asia, I think, and it used to favor the British Isles,
Mhm.
but now it doesn't. It favors more Asian immigration. So.
Oh, I'm so happy to talk to you because I never thought I'd have a.
Real
When did you say that the people who came over here who they couldn't find came over?
Well, I think it was later. My father said it was his great uncle, as his own. I think his great uncles, which would have been my great great uncles, that would have been back. I think he felt somewhere in the 1880s or 1870s,
Yeah.
which would not have been them then.
Uh-huh.
But although we did have relatives coming out of Galway, and we do have Curran relatives in Galway, so we may be related to the Galway Currans,
Yeah.
you know, from way back, which is very possible.
This says in the neighborhood of 1850.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's possible, but when my father comes this summer, I'm going to drive him up, and we can have
I'd
a good
love
talk.
to see him, you know,
And he's
I'll bombard him with questions.
oh well,
Yeah.
he can talk all day about things like that. He's got, as I said, a great memory. I write him a few questions about every week or two for
Oh,
this
yes.
book I'm writing
Yeah.
about. It's about Donegal, Ireland, and about the travels with my father. I call it Travels with My Dad.
Oh, yeah.
He, every time I write it, five or six questions, I get about a 5-page letter back in which he explains
Yeah.
all
Oh,
of the
that's what you
different
want,
stories.
too.
Yeah, but he remembers everything. It's one of those minds that cannot forget
Isn't it
anything.
grand?
Yeah.
Well, nobody can be Irish to me. They're number one. I don't know why.
Where does that leave us?
No.
Well, you're being adopted. You're adopted into the Irish. Now, actually, that was the old Irish, the old Celtic way. And the Irish epitomize a very, very ancient way of maintaining this Celtic attitude, which is that when you moved into a country, migrated as they did into Ireland about 500 BC, all the ancient stories talked about absorbing what were the native goddesses. Eru, which is Ireland, was the native goddess. Banba was the native goddess. Fola was the Irish adopted those goddesses, you see. And they adopted, and the big thing was to merge. That was not to create aristocracy or not to create this great division, which I think the British Empire adopted, but rather to intermarry. That was a big part of their migration pattern, was to intermarry with the people. So they would very easily then adopt. They would be clientships and adoptions in order to make new people and older people merge more quickly together. So in fact, do you have Hebrew background, Jewish background, Tony?
I do.
Yeah, because there was a great Hebrew migration into Ireland, they claim. Now there's linguistic evidence of it, as early as 300 BC. And one of the ancestors of the Irish people was Iberu. And the same ancestor was the ancestor of the Hebrew people. That's why the name Hebrew became Hebrew.
Really?
Yeah, actually that's a, you know, an understood, generally understood mythological connection, you could say.
So I could call myself O. Goldberg.
O just means grandson of, but it's, that's all it means.
Oh, yeah.
I often wondered about that, somebody was
Yeah.
putting on the dog when they put the O in
Well,
front of
here's
No, all it means is grandson. Oh, it really used to be UI a long time back, and it became fixed as a name about I think the 14th century.
Oh, yeah.
But before that, it just meant if you said, my name, for instance, your name would be, you would say, my name is Connor Mac. There would no first names. They would say Curran McConnor would be your name.
Oh, yeah.
You'd be called Curran McConnor. That is Curran's son of or daughter of, or for you it'd be Curran Ye Connor.
Oh, yeah.
Curran, daughter of Connor.
Oh, yeah.
That would be your name. And my name would be, if I was the same way, it'd be Curran McConnor. And if my grandfather's name was Gallagher, which it is, I would say Curran McConnor O'Gallagher, because I'm son of and grandson of.
Well, the Jewish people do the same thing. You know, like
yeah.
my name is Benjamin Barev. They say Barev, and they name the father and the grandfather,
Yeah.
and they can go and the long, and that's how that's how the Jewish people carried on their genealogy.
Yeah.
Is when they say their name, they said their name to include as many
Well,
as
that's exactly what. I'll just put you on a second, so your people, if we ever use this, which we may or may not, but adjustable. The Ben, it's interesting because Ben is in your language. There are quite a few words in the old Gaelic language they now think are out of the Hebrew and Hamitic languages. So Ben is used now like Ben Bulbin. It usually means a mountain or a height is a Ben. Now, if there's any connection there, I don't know, between the Ben, which it means for you son of, because there could be some strange etymological shift that might have made that also become, you know, a genealogical connection of some sort. One doesn't know. But it's a fascinating thing. I've been going up to I have some students at Orno who are Jewish, and I have a friend of mine who lives in Orrington, in fact, Walter Ziffer. I don't know if you've heard of him.
I've heard the name.
He's a good Hebrew scholar and taught up at the University of Maine, teaches. We may team teach together on Hebrew, on Jewish myth and Celtic myth.
Really?
Next fall, we were talking about doing a team teaching thing of Jewish and Celtic myth, because we both feel there's a lot of connections.
Yeah.
And nobody has really written on those connections of the Jewish, but you see, with myth you can go way, way back into prehistory, because then you find these interconnections. Just as Irish myth has a lot of connections with other Indo-European myth systems, like the Indian myth of India, Greek myths, and so on, because the people were all out of this ancient Indo-European stock.
There's a section in the city in Bangor, 2 or 3 streets,
Yeah.
and they call it the Camarine. Does that mean anything, Camarine?
Camarine. Well, Camarahahu is a Gaelic word that means Camar means how do you do?
How do you do?
Yeah, Camar. I don't know if
You have my
Camarine
chair, and I
could
have
have some connection, Camarine, to that, you know, because it would mean
Does it connect, any connection to Big Rock?
Under the hill, didn't he say something about under the hill?
Under the hill?
under the hill. Let's see. Rock is up, but behind the rock or behind the hill is Binya, Kulna Binya. I lived in an area just below a little rock. They call it the Rock. It was Kulna Binya.
In Ireland?
Yeah.
No,
Kulna Binya.
there's a reference in this genealogy that you'd be interested in. It says, it says the Curran brothers were the sons of Nicholas Curran and Bridget Fallon in Ireland, who were born in the vicinity of Clomore, County Galway, which means Big Rock. And the tradition tells them.
That's right. Well, see, Clohan in Clomore, more means large, and cloch can mean rock. And the old huts, ever hear of the beehive huts that the old saints used to use? The
Yeah.
old, they were called clochans, and it meant rock, little rock huts made of rocks. So the cloch there would be, so Clochmore would be, or was it Clochmore or Clochanmore?
Cloghmore.
Yeah, M-O-R, it really should be M-O-R, the E was kind of superfluous, not usually used, but it means big rock, yeah, big rock. But there's various names for rocks. Cashel, in fact, means also rock, Cush, curly or twisted rock, and so on. So there's a lot of, there's a lot of these names used for rock, because since Ireland's so rocky, there's many different rock names.
Oh.
Yeah.
It says behind this big boulder were a lot of little boulders, which seem to be the predominant product of their farms. It says.
That's right. That's
But
right.
there's a farms here too.
Do you have enough light?
A little more would always help.
Yeah.
Let me see, I'm trying to think of all the names. Mountains, for instance, that you think should have one name. Over here it's just called mountain, or maybe it's crag. In Ireland there are many names. There are, in Scotland and Ireland, croc or crua or crow.
That's the beginning.
So as they say, the crows. Do you come from near the crows? Which means crua, which means mountain, you see.
Oh, yeah.
Or Slieve, like Slieve League. In one of Yeats's poems, Slieve League is used, but that's in Donegal. Slieve also means mountain or cliff. And Ben, like I was just saying, Ben also means, like Ben Bulbin in Yeats's work, his favorite mountain was Ben Bulbin in Sligo. So Ben also means mountain. So that's just three, and there's many more names for mountains and rock and hills and so on. Crow is the most common one. It's Crua or Crow, like Crow Patrick in Ireland, where they climb the mountain,
Yeah.
Crow Patrick, every year, the pilgrimage. It's up to crows. But so they anglicized it like it's a crow. So when I was little, I used to say, I'd hear the English and I'd say, I wonder is it because the crows are flying up on the mountain? But it really meant was that it comes from the older Irish form, which C-R-O-A-G-H, crow, which means mountain. Yeah, so it's a lot of names. Interesting the way the Irish love to name and give various names for it.
Yes, that's
And then they would have Crow Moor, Crow Big, so on. Big means small, Moor means big, you see, large. So anyhow, there's a lot of, but I think Ben really there might come from pen, like the Pennines or the peninsula, something that protrudes or sticks up, you see, pen or ben. So because the Scottish also have a lot of bens, and so do the Welsh, ben and pen. So this is pretty common.
So most of the names of the areas, the regional areas, were named after the land formations or the something that would identify the region physically.
And she married him. He
Fox?
was.
It was a fox.
Oh, he was lovely. And they didn't have the money.
Yeah.
They had 6 beautiful children.
Apparently up the mother what they'll do to get their daughters married.
Oh, stop. Now that
Sure
wasn't
lucky
the way
I'm
it
not a
was.
daughter.
Send them way across the ocean.
So now she goes back there every 2 years, and she tells me, not too long ago, she sent me all this literature.
Yeah.
And she tells me how she does it. She has the bread and breakfast somewhere.
Yeah.
We're just learning a bread and breakfast here. But she,
Yeah.
she
That's
doesn't-
very common over there,
yeah.
yeah.
And she said she wakes up in the morning, right side of Galway Bay, you know, and
Yeah.
she thinks that I should go because I'm afraid to fly.
The people quite hospitable with them.
Oh, yes.
You go to visit them.
She's got 2 sisters over there somewhere, but she just telephones them, you know, she doesn't go to see them.
Yeah.
They hire a car, she goes with 2 relatives from Portland, and they pay her way, because she never was, her children grew up, she never had the fate, you know, the plane.
Yeah.
But now she does, and she tells me about it, you know, and it's really interesting. She'll come and tell us that, oh, it's wonderful, really interesting.
Is that Mrs. Miller?
Mrs. Miller's right down here,
Yeah.
that has a summer home down here. I think this is her summer to go.
She said that's one reason they liked out here, is put her in
Green.
mind in the summer to go.
The fields
green.
are
Yes.
so green.
It's very intensely green there. Even probably even more than England, I think, because one reason is it's a very lime. There's a lot of lime in the soil there, so it creates it. But there's something very magical in the air. I think the moon always appears larger.
Well, that's honest.
It really does. I don't know.
Your father was born there, or?
Yeah, I was born there too.
You were?
I
I'd like to when if he should come this time, I'd love to have him meet Mrs. Miller. Oh, you just love about to death.
Yeah.
Because she's
Yeah, that could be a name.
She's in town here, isn't she in town?
and she lives in South River.
Yeah.
I saw her at church this morning.
Huh.
What's her name
Her
again?
name is Maura, M-A-U-R-A,
Oh.
Maura Millet.
Millet.
But I don't know what her maiden name was, but her husband was a brewer boy
Yeah.
when her aunt brought her
Yeah.
to visit her.
Yeah.
But it just happened that
Yeah.
oh, she's so nice.
Does Mrs. Millet speak Gaelic?
I bet you she does. But she
I
said
don't know.
shortly after she come here, her parents moved to Wales. Is that handy?
Wales near? You mean near England?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right across from Ireland,
Yeah.
across the Channel. There's a
think
lot of Irish in
to work,
Wales, in fact.
They probably conditioned her better to work there, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of Irish settlements. There's a long tradition of Irish going to Wales and Welsh coming to Ireland.
Oh, yeah.
In fact, every name you come across is Welsh, W-E-L-C-H,
Yeah.
or Walsh, W-A-L-S-H,
Yeah.
are all variations. They're all the meaner people who came from Wales to Ireland.
Huh.
And they're very Irish names, but they may have come over to Ireland 1,000 years ago, you see.
Oh, yeah.
But they still have the name Walsh.
She has her two sisters. She has one sister, Bridie. I imagine
Yeah.
her name is Susan, maybe. And of course, Bridie comes here every off year.
Yeah.
When her sister don't go there, Bridie comes here.
Oh.
Bridie's got a son on the police department in New York.
Is that right?
He come over, you know,
Yeah.
back along. So
Yeah.
that's why Bridie comes to visit him.
Ah.
And, oh, it's...
Bridie is, I have relatives named Bridie. My sister's name is Maura, too, by the way.
Isn't it?
M-A-U-R-A.
And look at your friend, Ben.
I
Yeah.
know, I wonder
Maureen,
where
oh,
Maureen is.
she used to tell us about little
Yeah.
jaunty
She was
town.
born there. She said she would have a little bit of, she said her grandfather would give her a little bit of poutine or something.
Yeah, Pochine, yeah.
Poutine,
And they'd
which is
come
out
in
the
that-
field.
10
Oh,
o'clock,
she
they'd
was-
go out in the garden, be working at 10 o'clock, they'd stop and open up night.
No,
They
not
what?
like we
Did they
got.
still do that, you?
To open up the Pochine, you say?
No, not like we do.
Um,
That was
coffee,
something, that
but-
might have been cold tea or something.
Yeah, no, you'd never know. There are mountainy people over there too, and they have their stills. There's still stills over there. In fact, the government has been, there's a lot of people urging the government to legitimize all the pochine makers. They said because they're losing all those taxes. Said you make them legitimate and you get the taxes.
Oh.
So, but of course the pochine makers, that's the reason they're pochine makers. They don't want to pay the taxes. So that's passed around. It's not bad stuff, I'll tell you. I had some a couple
No, I don't
few
know.
months ago.
That's what Maureen used to say.
It's strong. It is strong.
And she always used to like to go back to visit, because here in this
Every couple
country,
of years she used to go back, didn't she?
Yeah.
She used to tell us about taking the milk to the city
Yeah.
with the donkey.
And the ox
Oh,
cart.
she was the sweetest thing.
Yeah.
Her and Mrs. Millett had the grandest time here,
Yeah,
didn't they?
Yeah.
we can introduce you to Maureen. She's over in New Hampshire now.
Oh yeah. This is Maureen
Toomey.
Toomey. Oh.
That's a good old Irish name,
Oh, that's
isn't
very.
it?
That's.
Yeah.
I think that's a
They're
Galway
from
name.
South Boston.
Yeah, that would be a
But she
Galway
moved-
name.
She moved up here and she ran the Montessori school for a while.
Did she?
Up here she got it
Yeah.
started, and now
Yeah.
she's working in,
Wouldn't that be lovely?
Yeah.
yeah, she's doing that work in
Yeah.
Keene, New Hampshire.
Yeah.
So we could put you in touch with her.
Okay.
She has some interesting stories as well.
Yeah. Get you on this for a second too.
How's your cold, Evans?
It's gone, almost.
Oh, good, that's from resting yesterday. There was a child behind us this morning who didn't, I would have kept it at home. She wasn't very old. I
Sounded like
think.
a whooping cough, didn't it?
Would we be able to call Mrs. Millett and go visit Mrs. Millett tonight
Oh,
while he was in town?
Yeah, I'm sure she'd be.
Rumors about you
Oh,
for
have
8 or 10 years now
Oh,
through
yeah.
Sylvia
Well, we,
and through others, and I see them once in a while in Bangor, and then and then over and over again I had this urge to come up, and then all of this sort of nice coincidence are going to
Isn't
build.
it funny how things happen,
Yeah.
you know, that you...
Yeah. And it just happened at a kind of convenient time too. We were doing this festival, so we're kind of doing some videoing at the same time, so it kind of
Well, is your
combined.
festival going to be around here in Orrington?
No, it's going to be just down in Surrey, and April 9th.
Oh.
You might
Where-
like to come down
Where
if you...
Orrington is having their bicentennial, I didn't know which might be doing something down there.
Yeah. No, this
I
is
don't-
in Surrey.
I don't know if the Orrington people like, they didn't used to like Irish people.
Would
You
you
know,
say
Well,
it
you
took,
feel, you know, I've been interviewing Yankee people recently, and Esther Woods and people like this who are down in our area, and it's interesting because I'm very aware, probably like you are, of this, of these people who have their blinders on, and the only thing that they see are the Yankees, and all they want to do is trace their ancestors to England, and anybody else doesn't exist or barely exists in their life.
Yeah.
That if you mention Irish to some of these people, they just, you know, it's blank. It's
Except
like
on St.
saying you're
Patrick's
black.
Day,
It's,
when all of
for
a
some of
sudden-
them, it's like saying you're a black.
Yeah.
Well, I have, you know, that's sort of the feeling that exudes from them, because the English-Irish animosity, antagonism is so deeply rooted.
It has never,
If you go into the history and the myth of it, you realize these battles between the English and the Irish have been going on for 2,500 years. This isn't just something recent. There have been back and forth conflicts going on for that long a time. So it's so deeply embedded that the English are either so sentimentalizing toward the Irish and so overwhelmed by being in love with them and writing about them, or else they go to the opposite extreme and can't stand them. And that's the relationship for hundreds and hundreds of years.
bad.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
the same in the Semitic lands
Yeah.
as well, with
The Arabs and the
Jews.
Jewish. Because there's so much in common in their history. It's all Semitic. So
Exactly.
they're two, the Hebrews and the Arabs are really out of the same root stock.
That's right.
Well,
So
what
they-
is a greenhorn in Ireland?
I never heard that expression
You
over
didn't?
there. No, I think that's the American expression.
That come from them.
Yeah. They do say things like, kind of pejorative terms are the spade carriers, what they call them. The laboring. If you were spalpeens. You ever hear that term, spalpeen?
Yeah,
It's
but I
a
never
name
knew
for
what
a
it meant.
shovel. If you were a shovel carrier, it means you put your shovel on the only thing you really possessed was your shovel, and you'd go to work with long distances sometimes to work as a laborer, maybe to Scotland. You'd go and go take a ferry across, cost you £1, then you'd walk 50 or 100 miles to a farm and work with your shovel for the season. And then you'd come back to work your own little farm in Donegal or Galway. And you were called a spalpeen, but it was considered the poor, the very poor. And then if you were a laborer on a farm and didn't even own a farm, that was the spalpeen, like a spalpeen moor or something like that. That would be the lowest of the laboring
I
class.
heard that word, but I never knew what it
Yeah.
was.
We used to
Small
call it in a different, we'd call somebody that was a crook or did us a bad thing, we call them a spalpeen.
Yeah, okay, that's the way that the word changed. In Ireland, it was somebody who was very poor and a hard worker and a laborer, maybe not hard worker, but
Yeah.
just a laborer. And over here, because people would say, oh, he's just a spalpeen.
Yeah.
He's a little down, because we own a farm, he's a little down
Way
lower
down on
scale.
the-
But then
oh.
here he'd become probably a kind of a
Oh,
crook
yes,
or something.
That's fine.
Yeah, it's interesting. So the word was kept here,
Yeah.
yeah.
I never knew really what it meant.
I asked my father, I looked up a word, see that, and was using it for very old times, called goban. And it meant a good worker, a carpenter, a good
Mechanic.
good mechanic, somebody who did rebuild carts and was a good craftsman. Was called a goban or a goban saw. And he wrote back. He says, "Yes, that was true in your grandfather's time, but when I was growing up, a goban saw was a man who was a botch at his work, who couldn't do the job well. Now, why it would go through that change, I don't know, but it went through some kind of a shift. But the words in English do that too. You say
Oh, yes.
the word sophistication.
Yeah.
Well, 2,000 years ago, a sophisticator was a man who was a man or woman who was in love with philosophy. He was a philosopher, sophisticated, you see?
Yeah.
A sophist.
Yeah.
And then later it came to be a person who was very good with rhetoric and could, like a lawyer who could change things, called a sophist. And then later on it became somebody who played around with weights and was a cheater, like somebody who ran a store and cheated with the weights. It's called a sophistry. And then gradually it came to be called somebody who was sophisticated. How did it change to be sophisticated? Somebody who is nicely dressed and knows their way around the city is called sophisticated. Up to 100 years ago, it was a pejorative term and a slur. And but you have to go back 1,500 years or 2,000 years ago to find that it was a positive term again. So it went through all these changes over the years.
Oh man, it's really is.
So Irish words go through the same changes. That's what I'm saying. They go through the same shifts. And what was a positive word a couple hundred years ago becomes kind of a pretty negative word.
It's interesting how things come and go from the vernacular.
Yeah.
Like for example, the example that I was thinking of was something that's classy.
Yeah.
It could be just as easily considered as sarcastic. Hey, you're pretty classy. You know, and then somebody would, not be, but it would be a sarcastic expression.
Yeah, that's true.
And then it would catch on in the vernacular and then stay there.
Yeah, that's just the way. Yeah. Well, actually, there are a couple of Irish expressions. I don't know if you've ever heard tigum. Apologists claim that the word tig became, because it was introduced to the Bahamas, the West Indies, by the Irish, who were sent over as tenants or as indentured servants a couple of hundred years ago. Some of them 300 or 400 years ago by Cromwell. Tig was so commonly used, do you understand, that the blacks adopted it as dig, and the word became, do you dig?
That.
And nobody knows where does that come. If it's not common and you won't find it in Africa, it comes out most likely out of the Irish word tig, do you understand? Do you dig? So, and the same with slapping of hands, which is not common in Africa at all. That's a very common, even now in Ireland. When you say hello in a fair, or you finish if you agree to buy or sell a cow, the agreement's made for buying or selling a horse or a cow or a sheep, you slap the hand. Or if you're greeting somebody before just about to start the deal, slap the hand. So again, it was adopted by the blacks. See, it's most. So a lot of these things that are thought of as very black, the black people as having that they have passed that into the American mainstream, you could say, has really sort of gone through a couple of shifts from back out of Ireland. That's most likely. You can't prove that, but that's the way I think it probably happened.
Interesting to observe in the old legends the similarities between the one legend being the same in a Celtic, for example, as in Indian or Hindu, will have the same storylines, except maybe the characters are different. And these come from very old times. It's interesting to notice that there are similarities in all the Chinese legends, for example. And you would wonder how they would interact, but when you said, for example, that 600 BC you said that there were Jewish immigrants to Ireland?
We're not sure, but some claim up around 300 BC. There was a symposium at the University of Toronto a few years ago, and they said there was a migration. They feel, because of the linguistic studies they've made, that there was a Semitic migration into Ireland, probably around that time. Now, it could have been the Phoenicians at that time were the great trading nations, and it could have been via or with or involved with setting up trading stations. And just like the Vikings later on, they became merged into the Irish population. Because the Viking people, you see, merged in Dublin is essentially a Viking city. It was founded around, it was older than the Vikings, but the Vikings started to come in there around the 8th and 9th century. And the 12th century, they finally were either left or merged into the Irish population. So a lot of what we consider Irish is really a cultural, not a genetic Ireland. In a way, that probably it'd be hard to say there's such a thing as a genetically pure Irishman or anybody. but the culture has remained consistent right up till recently, and absorbed all these different people into that culture and the language and so on. So it's only been under the influence of modern times that has begun to fall apart. Great changes.
Now this little girl comes here from Germany, and of course my English isn't so hot. I say anything that comes in my mind, and 2 or 3 things I have said, she has laughed at them. So explain it to me. What does it mean? She'll say, Barbara. And she said, explain it to me. Well, one is there's a nigger in the woodpile. Did you ever hear that?
Yes, I have.
So she took the, there's some more that there's a little pad here on the telephone. She said, is it all right if I take those expressions down that you say? She said, well, I said, what do you have over in Germany? What do you say? And I explained, what do you think a nigger in the woodpile means?
I've heard the term, but I'm not even sure. There's something wrong, I think, this way I understand. Something strange is going on.
Yeah, that's what we do.
Yeah.
What do you think, Ben?
I had not heard the term, Catherine.
You hadn't heard that nigger, did you, Nancy? Nigger in the woodpile?
Not before you used it.
I've heard it before.
I've heard it
I
too.
thought it was something like Hugh
Yeah.
was saying.
Yeah.
Something strange or
Fishy.
fishy
Fishy's
is going
going
Yeah,
on.
like
That's
say,
what we use it for.
now there's
Yeah.
a Jewish girl comes here, she says, well, it's not kosher. You know, so each
There's something in cautious, she said. There's a nigger in the woodpile. There's something about this deal that ain't cautious.
Yeah.
Like as if I'm gonna give her a $10 bill for 2. There's something
That was
wrong.
saying, well, if something's fishy, or I smell a rat, or...
Yeah, it's just the same thing. It's, oh, I don't know.
Yeah, but ain't we awful to be talking that kind of...
We're gonna go back and tell your
Aaron's
father
getting
about all
us-
of this.
Yeah,
And
Aaron's
we're gonna
getting
get in trouble.
education here.
They
Now, wouldn't it be
don't
wonderful
teach you that
if
in school, do they, Aaron?
people could listen to, they'd have a different feeling altogether about the Irish and the English and everything. Wouldn't, don't you think?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. I think the old Irish are just as die-hard as the English.
No, I don't think so.
They wouldn't forgive them.
No.
If we could believe some of the things the old people told us, we wouldn't either.
Well, they probably had a hard time.
Well, I find that that's really interesting to know that it's not a religious...
Not all
Totally are Catholic, but not always. In fact, as I said, around the turn of the century, the majority of the leaders, and going back for centuries, were Protestants. So it wasn't. It's only become fairly recent that it's become sectarian in
Yeah.
terms of religious. In the olden times, it wasn't. Meaning 100 years before, or even 50 years before. But even now, there are probably lots of non-Protestants and so on. In fact, Jewish were very much involved in the nationalistic movement in Ireland. Some very famous ones in Dublin. Jewish people involved. So it wasn't associated in their minds with the religious thing. That came sort of afterward, I think. It's more became stratified because the majority happened to be Catholic. But I don't think, I think, as I said, it's also the people who started up the recent more civil rights, they call it the civil rights movement of the 60s, like Bernadette Devlin and others, they came over here and kept saying, my sister helped drive her around in Philadelphia one time, but she kept saying, this is not a Catholic Protestant conflict, it's a civil rights movement. We
I haven't heard her name mentioned lately.
Yeah, she's McAlliskey now, Bernadette
Oh, is she?
Devlin McAlliskey, she married. And she is still doing her
The
thing.
same kind
Of
of
course,
way.
we
But
never
not as-
heard nothing about it. Only what we read about how cruel the English were.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
But of course, it was I suppose, an Irish
We found our
writer.
own opinion, maybe.
Just his opinion.
I think there's a lot of things going on. I think the Irish Catholics, for instance, over that where, as I said, my relatives often say they're planters. They still use the term planters. They don't say Protestant Catholic, they often say planters, even though they're 300 years there.
Yeah.
It's probably the attitude of Indians in this
That's
country
right,
to
yeah.
say
Yeah.
the settlers or something like
Yeah.
that. They might say of people that even though, but that's the same attitude. But there's the planter people Anyhow, I missed. I was going to say something, and now I've forgotten what I was going to say. It slipped my mind. The planters are they're Protestant generally, but yet about 100 years ago, there was a great intellectual movement in Ireland back to Catholicism, so that, say, a Bishop Newman became cardinal, was sent to Ireland from Oxford. It was called the Oxford Movement, and he was sent to Dublin to found the University College Dublin. Now, he was born and raised in Oxford, raised as it was a bishop in the English Church of England, and so on. And there was a great movement of intellectuals back into Catholicism at that period. 1860 was called the Oxford Movement, I said. So there was a conflict going on in England at that time, an intellectual ferment about what Catholicism and Protestantism represented. And they were really what they called it. The people converting, the intellectuals of Oxford converting back, they called it going back to the old religion. Because you have to remember, if you know your history, you know that in Ireland, the Irish up till the 12th century were Celtic Christians. They weren't Catholics. They had their own church, distinct from Rome. They had a monastic system, much closer to Eastern Orthodox, Russian or Greek Orthodox than it was to the Vatican, to the Roman. So the Pope at that time, in the 12th century, in 1180, was an English Pope, Adrian II, I think he was. And he urged Henry II to invade Ireland to bring religion to the pagan Irish. They weren't pagan, but they justified the invasion, see, by saying they were irreligious. And it was just a justification for invading. And then, after they had helped convert or push them into Roman Catholicism or bring them in accord with the Roman Catholic Church, policies, they came back in, the English, 300 years later, or 400 years later under people like Cromwell, and they said, now we've become Protestant, now we're going to bring you the real old religion, because the Protestants are really like Celtic Christians. We want to bring you the old religion, you see, that is Celtic Christianity, which were really Protestants, back into Ireland. Ergo, and the Roman Catholicism is really not right for you. You're worshiping the Virgin Mary, and you've got all these saints, and they're all phonies. We want to bring the true religion, which means pulling all these things down and just having the Bible and going to services and so on. So I see it, as a strange series of events, because first of all, this is the nature of the English-Irish controversy. First of all, they're bringing in Catholicism, then they're bringing in Protestantism, and then now many of the intellectuals, many are converting back to Catholicism again, you see, and then they call that the old church. We're going back to following the old church again. So anyhow, that's...
And the deep fat and empty.
Well, now what about, we have, and Chicky,
Oh,
now what?
the music group?
The music or the dancing group, whatever they are, they're down to the Civic Center.
Oh,
I
yeah.
wonder where they're moved.
The Irish Roman Center?
No, the Platters.
The Platters.
It's a dance, and I'm wondering where they get that name.
I don't know. I've never heard that.
It's an Irish group?
Oh, no, it isn't an Irish, it's a group.
It was the rock and rollers, I think.
I don't know.
Rather
But her and Chicky, they were, I don't know
it's
where
like
they
something like that.
The Platters are here, and they get down in there, they sell out, they sell the house out, every year. They're here for a week.
Can't get a ticket for
What did you do back when you were young here on the farm for entertainment or
still
for
young.
music? Well, I know you are, but what I should say is younger. When you were younger.
Now that wasn't a fair question, you.
Well, let's go back to your youth. Now, I talk about my youth when I was the age of my son, but so we'll say going back to your youth, your more youthfulness. You're youthful now, but when you were more youthful, what did you do for music, for instance?
Well, what did we do?
Go on the piano,
We had a piano.
Would you?
Had been dusted.
the banjo.
They had music, banjo,
Joe had
and
harmonica.
piano, and they had
Who was it that played the harmonica and danced on the table?
No, they had dances, you know, they had dances, and there was two or three people had violins and
Where did you do the dances down in the hall here?
No, well,
take
I
a
worked in the city
sit.
until just
Yeah.
back on until I retired. I worked for the telephone company.
Oh, did you?
And so I used to commute.
You got to tell them about the dance hall.
Oh, yeah. But the dance, God, yes, we had our own dance hall.
Once was at, yeah,
Yeah.
the big house. And the yellow house, Mr.
Mitchell?
Mitchell's house, Mr.
Yeah.
Mitchell's house. That was where my grandfather
Huh.
and Thomas. And then Uncle Michael was over here, went down at the foot of this hill. See, Holden begins right down here, Orrington ends,
Oh,
and this is Holden over here.
so you're very close to Holden.
Yeah. And the bus for the children turned there. Now that boy that was here this afternoon, called boy, his grandma, was his grandmother, great-grandmother? Great-grandmother. She was a Curran, and he was, and he's going to go down again this time. The last time he went, he didn't have a very good companion. Another man went with him, and he thought that he had, until now, he thought he had another man that was going to be more, you know, better for him, but the man said, just he won't go.
Yeah.
And he's going to go, he went on a cruise, not a cruise, what do they call it, back along. Not private. This time he's going on a private one.
Or charter?
Charter.
Yeah.
Yeah, this time he's not going to go. And he's going to, he went, stayed at a motel. He went on a KSD one the last time, him and his brother. But David is gone this time. David's dead.
You met Paul, did you Nancy last summer, or did you?
No,
He doesn't talk too much, has
No,
he?
he's been in the hospital again. He has trouble, an infection or something, 2 or 3 times. And this is his son, lives right over here on the homestead, on the lane. This is all. Then he reminisced about Ireland this afternoon. But he said corned beef and cabbage don't taste over in Ireland like the way his wife used to cook it.
Well, I suppose the Irish come over here and say the same about Ireland.
I never had corned beef and cabbage in Ireland. I think it's actually the first time I'd ever known about corned beef
Oh,
and
I
cabbage.
didn't
I read
know
it in
that.
a cartoon strip, Maggie and
Yeah,
Jigs.
it's all in-
And I asked my father about it. I said, they say here's Irish all the time, but
Now,
from
out to
somebody
St.
else.
Mary's Church, for St. Patrick's Day, they had, I don't know how many hundred out there, they had people cater to the corned beef and cabbage.
Yeah.
And they had to draw a line this year because last year they were too many. Because it's a good drawing card, you know.
Yeah.
but,
Yeah.
They're going to get
It's
it.
in this country, everyone desires to send it into mine.
Yeah, 17.
Well, the reason was, you can see, Irish couldn't afford beef. They would never have beef. The beef would have been owned by the, they would sell that to pay the rent, or pay their taxes,
Oh, I
or pay their tithes, or whatever. But they might have, sometimes they might have some mutton or lamb
Yeah.
once in a while. And sometimes they might have some, they'd have some fish, of course, go out
Yeah.
fishing to get fish. But probably the last thing most of the Irish, unless there were big farmers, there was a few
Yeah.
that were big farmers, they would never have been able to afford, up until recently. Of course,
Yeah.
things have changed there as they have changed here. But up until World War II, I would say, most people did not eat beef or red meat at all.
Of course, now they tell us it isn't good for you.
They'd have chicken,
Yeah.
but that's maybe the reason the Irish are known for
They're well.
I have now great uncles too, still in Ireland. Well, he died recently. Currans. I went to the graveyard to see the ages and to see this.
Yeah. That's where you get
and
most of your information.
there
from.
was 1, 2, 3, 4. I think there were 3 brothers. One was 100, one was 101, and one was 102.
Only then.
And they were buried in the same lot, one on top of the other.
Yeah.
They dig down to the head ledge, you see, a stone,
Yeah.
and then they would,
Yeah.
because there's so little room for cemeteries, they would, and that same plot. Now my father dug the plot for my grandmother, for his grandmother, when she was going to be buried. That was the family would go up and do it. That was
Oh,
expected.
yeah. It was,
They'd hand dig it, and it reminded me of reading something in Shakespeare, who was it, that picked out the skull, digging down, and he was picking up the skulls of his own ancestors and looking at them and putting them aside. And they would put them into a corner, but they had to reuse the same plot, you know, and then they would start stacking the coffins again. That probably, that little plot, 3 feet by 6 feet or whatever it was, might have been used for hundreds of years, many generations, that same little spot.
Well, see, that's the thing. And now the cremating, because we haven't got land
Yeah,
for the cemetery.
yeah. They may have to start that in Ireland too, cremating.
And they wouldn't years ago, that was against the Catholic religion to cremate.
That's right, that's changed now, I think.
There are a lot of changes.
Oh yes, there are.
But they're all for the best, I think, maybe. There's a reason for them.
There's a reason for them. Who knows whether they're for the best, but whatever, I guess, accommodates itself to a new time, it has to be.
Everybody in the Hall of Family buried in the, we buy a lot years ago, and all of, what does it take, 12 in the hall. And, so, I know our lot, there's my aunt and my father, his sister, my father and his sister, bought this lot of 12 together, well, there's 6 on each side. So,
Now, would they be stacked coffins
I
or?
don't know how
No,
they do
no,
that.
they're all separate.
They're separate. See, that would be different right there.
But they tell us now, you could, some of them, it's been there.
Earlier ones.
Yeah,
You could use them over again.
yeah, you could. Well, see, in older times too, like in Ireland, there, everything was wooden, even the crosses, made with little stones, but they would disappear and fall down, and then people, you know, after a few generations would have forgotten or something, or wouldn't keep it up. But at least that allowed the plot to be reused. But now you have big concrete, sometimes concrete
do here
coffins and concrete
Yeah.
or stone, marble
That's
covers.
good, yeah.
They'll be good there for hundreds of years.
Yeah, you can dig into them.
No, that's a must here, this cement balls.
Yeah.
No, the only thing that we assumed, that this girl that he married, don't we think that, and his father owned a lot of this land?
Oh,
Mr. Patton,
Yeah, I guess
he
so.
married Catherine Patton,
And he bought this
and he,
area.
all this, and my grandfather
And-
bought all this stuff from his wife's father, you know.
Yeah.
Of course, they used to tell us about that, you know, said, he'll be here tomorrow to tell us, and tomorrow never come, we forgot all about it.
Yeah.
You know, when you're growing up, those things
Right,
don't interest
yeah.
you. And the only time we've been interested is because, it's now since, oh, it's Haley.
Well, my daughters was a good pack, so.
Well, they were all good. Now, they didn't do anything, rest assured that they didn't do anything. Someone said, oh, they were driven out of Ireland, or they did this, that, the other. I think they couldn't get good work. The potato famine was over there, they were
I'm kind
hungry.
of scared to go to mailbox someday.
Dog.
Yeah.
No, I don't believe, I'm all for the Irish, the number one in my book. Well, Jewish too, everybody. No, but they talk about the Irish, they're not like that.
It's a great day, forget it.
No, I guess.
I am too,
Huh?
100% in my book.
No, I like everybody.
Well, didn't you tell me that this house used to be in another location? Or was it that house? Which was the house that was
There was 2 or
moved?
3 nights I thought of it, but I go on, but
No, stop. Some of
I
these
guess-
boys
no,
will
I don't
think
think
you're tipsy.
No.
No, maybe the night you brought them upstairs.
No, there was, back in the old days, wasn't one of these houses moved to a foundation? Or is that another one of your stories?
Charlie Mitchell's,
Charlie Mitchell was moved, that was a show
that was moved down to the show-up.
but where Linda is,
Uh-huh.
And they took it
And
off
Danny
board by
McDonald.
board, and then they put it down on the show, and then the next person brought it all back and put it
No
on.
kidding.
They had different ideas.
Huh.
No, and this house right down here is the original Fields house. This was Fields' property right here.
Oh.
See, there was no, the Currans, I told maybe they owned it, and Uncle Michael had to go down there and hold it. And so this is Fields' property. So
And this pond is called Field.
they have Fields Pond.
Pond after him.
We don't know too much about them, but their ancestors come here, or have come here, they're in New Haven.
Yeah.
And up until a couple of years ago, we used to hear them, or 3 years ago, we used to hear from them every Christmas. One of the girls, a granddaughter, great-aunt, used to write us the
They were all
doings for the
teachers,
year.
wasn't they?
Huh?
Teachers, wasn't they?
All teachers there. One of them went to Connecticut, and then she brought the others down there, and they all married down there.
Yeah.
And they always come back, and they stayed in this, so when my father bought this place, this little house, the people, her parents lived there, the Horace and Matilda Field, they were some of the original Fields.
Yeah.
And it was in the deed that they should have a lifelong lease with it.
Huh.
And so my father honored that, and these people used to come here every summer and visit their parents and, until they died. And the latter part of their life, one of them had to go in a nursing home. But after that, they used to come here, and they all done very well, because they were all, even the young people used to come at, they might have graduated from college like on Friday. Well, of Saturday or Sunday over the weekend, they always want to come here, spend the honeymoon, you know, because there were so many memories and pleasant things.
Yeah.
And just about, I don't know if there's some way I can find out they're in, some of them are in
Must be
Haven.
kind of old.
Well, the original one, the young girls are not old. There's 4 or 5 generations, you know. No, I could find out. Carolyn's daughter that's in Hartford could find out also. And, no, they were so interested here, you know, tell us about, you know, about their grandparents, great-grandparents, you know, I don't know how many down the line, 2 or 3 times. And, sometimes, like I say, it's a grandparent, it might be a great-great-great-parents, but I don't know, there's something about your roots or somewhere.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, they go from Maine, and they get through college, they go away and get a big job. But when they're retirement, they want to go back to they kind of, the rush and the dash in the big cities, you know.
Was your hometown, Bill,
Well, I was born in Michigan.
in Michigan?
Oh,
Yeah.
Nancy!
Nancy, we got your name again.
Another Michigan. Yeah. But my father's family is Lithuanian, and my grandmother was Danish. Grandmother.
That makes you part Irish.
I
Somebody
was just gonna
is
say,
Danish.
there must be a way that they get
That's
connected
true.
up.
Well, the Danish Vikings dominated Dublin for 300 years, and the settlement of Dublin was basically Danish settlement. James Joyce, when he started writing, he based much of his early work on Ibsen, and he wrote Ibsen letters. This is a Danish writer. James Joyce is a great Irish writer. So he'd write to Ibsen, and he would say, you know, I claim my Danish, that I have a Danish connection because I'm living in Dublin, which is a Danish city. And Ibsen wrote to him, you know, answered his letter. He's only 18 at the time. But he actually learned Danish in order to read Ibsen in the original. But there are a lot of Danish names, believe it or not, in Dublin still. Very Danish names that are
Have
still.
you met any Lithuanian people here?
Actually, I haven't. No.
Now, who would be?
No.
It's been a
unusual.
great lumber country, wasn't it?
I'm Lithuanian.
No,
Are you Lithuanian? Is that
My
right?
grandmother was from Lithuania, Bessie.
what
No.
about us?
Was it Bessie? Yeah, Dave, wasn't Grandpa Dave's?
He's playing Nick Rodigan fan.
You must have worked somehow.
Oh, you've done
Well,
some.
what kind of farm?
You
Now,
used
were
to-
there
Well,
cows and
well, they
chickens and all
planted,
that?
like they plant potatoes.
You ought to be able to follow it,
Planted potatoes, and they planted dry beans, and had a big garden, you know, and,
You
no,
have 25 cows,
a lot of
you
cows.
rented 25 boats
So you sold the milk, you
Yeah.
milked cows?
Yeah.
to
No
the
cows,
city
yeah.
every morning. Send her out to work every day.
Who would bring it into the city, the milk?
Alfred.
You would bring it in.
I wasn't always in this rocker. There was a few minutes to get out.
How many, did you go door to door with the milk?
No, went to the dairy.
Oh, yeah.
You went door to door for a while.
Yeah.
You had customers
We
for a
had
while.
depressions here, no worry.
Oh, so you'd go door to door if there was a depression? If there was,
Well,
Milk market was off,
yeah.
people wasn't buying it. It was only 8 cents a quart.
Is that all?
I was looking for customers, a woman called in the one day and she said, "Have you got an extra quart of milk?" And I said, "Yeah. We milk Jersey cows, lot cream."
Oh, yeah, I love Jersey cows.
She looked upstairs.